When one feels hungry, thirsty, sleepy, sick, tired, hot, cold, there is a physical sensation of these conditions, and usually also thoughts associated with the condition. For example, if we are very hungry, we might feel the urge to get food, or if we are sick, besides the physical condition, we might be worried or anxious to see a doctor. In any case, is it ego alone the experiencer of both the physical condition and the mental states derived from the condition? Since Bhagavan says the body is insentient like a pot in verse 10 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, Anubandham, we must infer the body can't feel the disease, just be the recipient for the disease, to appear or manifest, whereas it is ego that experiences pain, anxiety, worry, and so on. Is this correct?
Yes, it is ourself as ego alone who experience phenomena of all kinds, whether physical or mental. Bhagavan makes this clear in so many ways. For example, in verse 22, I think it is, yes, verse 22 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, he begins with the word mati, which in this context means mind. And in the Kalivemba version, he added before the word mati, evayam karnam, which sees everything. That implies which experiences everything. And here mind means, when Bhagavan talks about mind, we need to distinguish in which sense he's using the word mind. The term mind can refer to all the other thoughts, which are all objects. Or the mind can refer to the knower of all those other thoughts. In other words, the first thought, I, the ego. It is ego that knows everything. So when he says it's the mind which sees everything, he's using the term mind there in the sense of ego, the knower of all phenomena. And when he says in verse 10 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham, the body is insentient like a pot, what he means by the body is not just the physical form of the body. As he says in verse 5 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, Uru Pancha Kosa Uru, the body is a form of 5 sheaves. Therefore, all 5 are included in the term body. So when Bhagavan's talking of the body, in most cases, he's referring not just to the physical form of the body, but all the 5 sheaves. For example, when he describes ego as the false awareness, I am a body. In other words, that which is aware of itself as I am this body. What he means by body is not just the physical form of the body, it's all the 5 sheaves. The 5 sheaves being this physical form, the life that animates it, and the mind, intellect, and will that operate within it. All these 5 are jada, as Bhagavan says in verse 22 of Upadesha India. He says, what he says in verse 22 of Upadesha India, since body, mind, intellect, life, and darkness is there referring to the Anandamaya Kosha, or will. That's the darkness of desire, which is what draws our mind outwards and therefore conceals the real nature from us. Since all these 5 are all jada and asat. Jada means they're devoid of awareness. Asat means they're devoid of existence. They have no real existence of their own. They just seem to exist. So since they're jada and asat, they are not I, which is sat. So here Bhagavan makes it very clear that when he says the body is insentient, he's referring to all the 5 sheaves. So since the 5 sheaves, why he emphasized that the 5 sheaves are insentient is that they're all phenomena. They're all things known by us. This physical body is obviously, it's a physical phenomenon. It's something we can perceive. The life, though we can't exactly see the life, we can see all the signs of life in terms of the breathing, the heartbeat, the digestion, all these physiological functions. These are all the manifest form of the prana. The prana is that life force. So though we can't see the prana as such, I mean, we can't see it as a physical object. We can see all its physical effects. But we're very well aware of the prana, even though we can't, we can only, even apart from the physical manifestations, we're aware of what it is to be alive. Life is something more subtle than just these, all these physiological processes. It's the force that drives and holds these physiological processes together, gets them all functioning in a coordinated manner. And then the mind, in this context where the Manomaya Kosha, the sheath composed of mind, that refers to all the grosser functions of the mind. That is perceptions, memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so on. These are all described as the mind. These are the grosser elements of the mind. These are all things that we're aware of. We're aware of our perceptions, we're aware of our memories, we're aware of our thoughts, feelings, and so on. These are all they're all objects known by us. Likewise, the intellect. We are aware of the workings of the intellect, the understanding, the judging, the clarity, the distinguishing, the power to distinguish one thing from another. These are all the functions of the intellect. We're aware of all these functions. And the will, in its grossest form, consists of all the desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and so on. In a subtler form, it consists of the likes and dislikes that give rise to the desires and so on. And still subtler form is the inclinations or vasanas. We are aware of all these things. So all these things are objects known by us. So none of these things know themselves. Perceptions don't know themselves. Memories don't know themselves. Thoughts don't know themselves. Feelings don't know themselves. The functionings of the intellect don't know themselves. The vasanas, the likes and dislikes, the desires and attachments, they don't know themselves. They're all things experienced by us. And it's only when we rise as ego, thereby taking this body consisting of 5 sheaths to be I, but we're aware of all these things. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 4 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, Uruvam Tānayin Ulhu Paramatran. If oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If oneself is not a form, who can see their forms and how? We seem to be a form only because we've risen as ego, because the nature of ego, as soon as we rise as ego, we attach ourselves to the form of a body. We identify this body consisting of 5 sheaths as I. So it's only as ego that we're aware of all these phenomena. Phenomena seem to exist only in the view of ego. This is why Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, Ahandayundayan anatamundahum. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahandayindrail indruanatam. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Everything here refers to all the phenomena. The reason they come into existence only when ego comes into existence, and the reason they do not exist when ego doesn't exist, is that they seem to exist rather only in the view of ego. So in sleep, we don't rise as ego, so we're not aware of the body, the world, the mind, the thoughts, the feelings, perception, memories. We're not aware of anything other than our own ever self-shining being. I am. That is the constant, one constant awareness. That is the fundamental awareness. Awareness of all other things arises only when we rise as ego. So ego is the experiencer of everything. So whether it is the um, the physical symptoms of the disease or all our reactions to those physical symptoms of a disease, the emotional reaction, the worry, the concern, all these things, all are phenomena experienced by us. So this is fundamental in, it's a fundamental distinction made in Vedanta and in Bhagavan's teachings. The first thing we need to clearly distinguish is to distinguish the knower from the known. This is what is called drik, drisya, viveka. Distinguishing, drik literally means the seer, drisya means what is seen, but it's not referring just to seeing through the eyes. Seeing is used in a metaphorical sense to refer to all experiences. So we need to distinguish the experiencer from everything that is experienced. Now it seems to us that we are this person, this body consisting of 5 sheaths. But if we think about it carefully, these are all things that are perceived by us. This body and mind and all the 5 sheaths, it appears in our view and it disappears in our view. It appears when we wake up, it disappears when we go to sleep. In dream, some other body appears. But in sleep, no body at all appears. But we remain constant throughout all. We are the one constant in all these 3 states. So since all phenomena appear and disappear in our view, they are something other than ourself. So though we now mistakenly aware of ourselves as if we were this body means all the 5 sheaths are actually drisya. They're objects of perception. They're not the perceiver. The perceiver is ourself as ego. So only when we distinguish ourselves as the knower from all these things that are known can we begin to investigate what we actually are. Because so long as we mistake ourselves to be any object, any phenomenon, anything that is experienced, if we're asked to investigate ourselves, we'll be investigating phenomena rather than investigating ourselves, the knower of all the phenomena. So this distinguishing ourselves as a knower from everything that is known, that is a drik, drisya, viveka, is absolutely fundamental. So it's very important that we understand this very clearly, that we are not anything that is any object of perception. We are the perceiver of all these things. Of course, that's not what we ultimately are, but we first need to distinguish ourselves as the perceiver. And then this perceiver, this seer, this knower, is what we have to investigate. And when we investigate ourselves keenly enough, we will find that we are not even the knower. We're not even that which experiences all these things. We have a pure awareness from which this knowing, this experiencing ego arises and into which it subsides. Because ego, the knower of all phenomena, appears along with phenomena and disappears along with phenomena. So from what does it appear and into what does it disappear? That is into our being, the fundamental awareness I am. So that is what we actually are. But in order to experience ourselves as that pure awareness I am, we need to investigate ourselves as the ego that we now seem to be. We seem to be ego so long as we're aware of other things. So if we focus our entire attention on ourselves, to the exclusion of all other things. In other words, if we attend to ourselves so keenly, but we cease to be aware of anything else, then we will be aware of ourselves as pure awareness. As soon as we're aware of ourselves as pure awareness, we'll cease to be ego, because ego is the impure awareness, I am this body. When we actually experience ourselves as, as we actually are, namely as the pure awareness I am, ego is thereby annihilated. So the very basis of Bhagavan's teachings, the very basis of all of Vedanta, is this distinguishing ourselves from a body that we seem to be. That Bhagavan has emphasized this in so many ways. And this is the fundamental teaching of the Upanishads. It's a fundamental teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna begins his teachings in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, distinguishing ourselves from the body, saying it's the body that dies. The body is just like the clothes. We put them on, and when they get worn out, we discard them and put on a new set of clothes. Likewise, this body, it's something other than ourselves. And then in the 13th chapter, he talks about the kshetra and the kshetrajna. Kshetra literally means the field, but he explains it in this context, it refers to the body. And the kshetrajna is the knower of the body. That is ego. So if we investigate this ego, we will then know ourselves as the underlying reality of ego, which is the pure awareness I am, in whose view nothing other than itself exists. It's only when we rise as ego, as Bhagavan says in verse 4 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, if oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. So we're aware of phenomena only when we mistake ourselves to be one among those phenomena, or a set among those phenomena, namely this person that we now seem to be, this person consisting of 5 sheaves. I hope that's a clear answer to that question. I mean, I could have answered the question in one word, yes, because what the questioner asked is, I mean, when he said, is this correct? Yes, it is correct, but I just elaborated upon it because it's very, very important to understand this.